public hearing is now called to order at 5 minutes past 6 on Wednesday, July 30th of 2020. This hearing is being held as required by the provisions of Chapter 131, Section 40 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth and Act relative to the protection of the wetlands, as most recently amended. Notice of the time and place of this hearing is posted in the town hall. Persons wishing to be heard will be called in the following order. As I say, it always means this is being either broadcast live or recorded for broadcast. Although the microphones probably won't pick them up, if you have your telephone set below, that would be great, or vibrate. Having a little microphone issue here, and because whatever gets recorded here is public record in our minutes, we do ask if you do speak to identify yourself, and you try to use the microphone down here and hear our agent, so that way we get everybody's name. You don't have to tell us your house number, just tell us your street name. And I think that will do it. So first order of business is minutes for approval from the July 14 meeting. And then send out a slightly amended set, and hopefully you've had a chance to read those. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, we have a second.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? That's unanimous. Normally, do we have any meeting mail? No meeting mail. So I see nothing on the agenda for discussion of old business. So we're going to skip on to new business. And we have an enforcement order in front of us for our PJT property. So we're being asked to vote on that. But before that happens, we're going to have a couple of presentations. So what I will do is I will have the town's assistant health agent speak first. And then I'll give a chance for a rebuttal by PJT, and then I will ask for questions and further commentary from anybody else that's great. I can, I'm not sure they think. That's great. You don't exist anymore.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Hannon. I'm the Assistant Health Agent for the town of Acushnet. And as well, I am the Soil Board Enforcement Officer as well. So, I started work on July 1st. I've only been here a month. I'm doing a lot of research and looking into complaints at the quarry. And in going through documents and looking at all of our, I noticed that there are things going on with the appears to either be in wetlands or in the buffer zone. So I alerted the conservation agent to what my findings were and asked her to come out to the site for a visit. So the first thing that I found, the EPA is doing a cleanup in the harbor and in the Acushnet River, and they're working in an area where the outfall from the Key Quarry discharges out to the Acushnet. Goes to a tributary, into a small salt marsh, and then out. The EPA contractor gave me permission to access their work site. When I went into the work site, it was very obvious that the silt has come from the quarry, from their basin, and made it out into the salt marsh. I took photos of it. I sent them to the agent. When the agent came out for a follow-up visit, she saw the impacts herself. She met with the EPA contractor. He explained to her what they found, and that was the result of that enforcement order. If you went back to the basin at the outfall and looked at the stone channel in there before the discharge onto the road out to the river, all of the rock is heavily silted. There's a lot of silt getting by whatever their mechanical means or physical means is of settling in the water before it's discharged. An important thing about that discharge out to the Acushnet River is that under the Wetlands Protection Act, the Commission has the right to assert jurisdiction when work in a resource area impacts an outside area to a stream offsite. So because of this, all of this stormwater all of their drainage systems, all of their settling basins have become jurisdictional to this commission. So you have the right to impose conditions, ask for studies, ask for professionals to review all of those things. It's absolutely in your jurisdiction now. And it's very important to the town that we as a town finally get an understanding of exactly what's going on at that site. All of the information that's on file and still pending with EPA is over 8 years old. There really hasn't been any new delineations or research done at that site in quite a while. So I brought to my early attention that the work they were doing in that basin that they call 1C, but if you look on the ANRAD that was filed in 2010 on Keating's behalf, that basin 1C is actually delineated as a resource area. Look at the legend on the plan, it's coded as a resource area. And for any work, you know, they have to apply for permission, notice of intent, RDA, and none of that has been done. When the agent issued the enforcement order and stop work order, she directed Keating to stop work in the resource areas and to wait until the Conservation Commission came out, viewed what the agent saw, and either ratified this enforcement order or didn't. But as you saw on Saturday, Keating went ahead and already did the work that they thought needed to be done in that resource area at that basement in front of the property. They put in a stone check dam, and they put in a stone letdown channel. They're under stop work order. They shouldn't have done it. Did they do it to maybe make you think that the agent didn't really see it? That there was no violation? I can't say. But my observation of what they did is that they didn't use washed stone. And had the commission gone through the process and inspected this and done an order of conditions, you would have required that they use washed stone, not stone full of silt, so that the next time it rains, that silt washes out and heads out to the Acushnet River. There's a whole bunch of agencies involved in this. There's a potential for a 401 water quality violation here, which would be on the Corps of Engineers. There's a potential for a 404 violation, which would also be the Corps and EPA. I believe that they've been notified. The EPA currently is on a phase 1 COVID status. They can't do any site visits. They are working from home. And basically, as soon as they're out of their phase 1, EPA enforcement will be coming out and making a visit, getting together with the commission, and figuring out what needs to be done there. I was Conservation Commissioner myself, and that's why I looked at this when I first went out in the field from a conservation point of view. Wetlands, buffer zones, impacts, all of those things. One of the things that I think the town needs you to do tonight is to require Keating, but because there is a controversy here, Keating says it's not, the town says it is. Keating says it's not a resource area. We say that ANRAD says it is, Keating says it isn't. So my recommendation is that the town or your commission asks DJ Keating to retain a qualified, certified professional soil scientist to go out and do these evaluations of the resource areas, stormwater, erosion controls, and then as well a certified professional in erosion and sediment control, or some equivalency. It hasn't worked having Keating be the company that self-monitors what they do. I'm out investigating fugitive dust complaints. There's impact of stormwater coming off the site. The permits all say that no stormwater leaves the site. That's not true. You've seen the topography from being there on Saturday. It would be impossible for all stormwater to drain back to the quarry. That needs to be evaluated. And then There are other impacts. And I think the other impacts will come to the surface when you get that certified professional soil scientist and a wetland scientist to go out and delineate all the resource areas, all the wetlands, all the habitat, any impacts, and what those impacts are. It would be better for the town if these qualified professionals that are engaged with this report to the Conservation Commission. And if they report in so much time. Currently, there's a requirement in the NIPT's permit that they do stormwater reports after 1/10 of an inch of rain. So I would recommend that the qualified erosion control specialist be the person who inspects the site after an event of more than 1/10 of an inch of rain. And that they submit that report to the agent, Robert Kelly, within 72 hours of that rain event. If they retain a qualified wetland scientist to delineate the resource areas and habitat in the property, they should submit an assessment report of on-site and off-site wetland alterations and a plan for wetland restoration and stabilization, and that's what the commission decides to do. And I would ask that it includes BBW, bank, stream, habitat, and buffer zone. And right now, when Keating discharges, they're doing their own testing. They're doing their own certifications. They haven't, from what limited records I can find online, they haven't failed the test in a while for suspended solids or pH. And looking at what was in Basin 1C, the turbidity of that as it sat there, and knowing that that water comes from their Basin 1A, I'm looking at the turbidity of Basin 1A, I would be suspect whether representative samples are actually being taken at the outfall when they discharge. And I think if they were, we wouldn't have the impacts to the salt marsh that both of you folks have all seen in the pictures. The town, Board of Health, Soil Board, would recommend that Keating also retains a licensed site professional or a professional engineer who acts as a third party to monitor the daily compliance of the outfall, that person actually performs the required testing, submits the report, and then tells Keating if it's okay to discharge, rather than leave it up to Keating to just decide it's okay to discharge, it's not working. As far as activities in the buffer zone, if you look around the site, Keating has utilized the buffer zone to their fullest. They're right up against the resource areas in the buffer zones. And if you look at the materials that they've put into the buffer zones, they're not able to control that from impacting resource areas, habitat, and swamp. I know that they could get permission to use the buffer zone if they could demonstrate that what they're doing wouldn't impact those areas. But my feeling is they've already demonstrated that they can't do what they do and not impact those areas. So I think it would be a wise move to require Keating as part of your enforcement order to remove all materials, everything from the buffer zone. Unless they can convince you that they have some better way of doing it and not impacting those areas. And that's all I have.
And to your last point about removing materials from the buffer zone, can you be more specific as to which buffer zone we're talking about?
In the rear of the property, where we didn't get to go on Saturday, beyond the power lines of Lane Lane, they have moved a whole bunch of basins to the back of that property. I believe the sand washing I haven't been allowed back there, so I can't say specifically, but some of those basins are overtopping. The side slopes of the basins are steep, and they're eroding the stormwater, And actually, at the site visit on Saturday, one of your commission members mentioned that he recreates back in that area, and that he has seen what I would say, he said were, major excursions into the priority habitat. And it's not only priority habitat, it's also designated on all of our as swamp. So that's two resource areas being affected. And if you look on Oliver, it's not the best view, but you can see all the gray silt going out into that swamp and back and wetlands. There is a lot of material back there. It's high, it's dry, it blows around, and when heavy rainwater hits it, it flows freely. They've done nothing to stabilize anything. There's no loom, there's no vegetation, there's nothing on anything. It's just open to whatever nature brings it. So it would be wise to have them take it out of the buffer zone.
Actually, before I have PJT representatives, I want to ask our agent if she wants to add anything in here.
No, I think that's covered the violations, but I want to make it clear that there's not much really is hurt because of this stuff, it's this high, gray, on all the grass. It's this stuff all over the bottom of the wildlife department. Nothing quite going down. If you look at Oliver, see the silk covers it part of your. So, yes, I would say it's
So, somebody from PJT would like to respond.
Okay, first of all, my name is Doug Vigno. Doug Vigno, PJ Keating, Environmental Compliance Manager. And the first question I have for you is to show us where the resource area is mapped out front, which is the purpose of these enforcement orders, is the two, the sediment basin and the drainage ditch put in by the town. Okay, so we can go over those things. We've discussed it quite a bit at the time. This is, that's, you're calling that a wetland area?
That's marked off based on what is being listed as.
Who marked this up? Post? Who did?
This is the right here.
What's all the yellow mean?
yellow is the student area that indicates swamp.
This part here.
Okay. USGS Quad Swamp. That's dated 1941. Okay. Which, Wetlands Protection Act wasn't enacted until 1972, I believe. And so it's really kind of irrelevant what's on this plan right now. This particular area here, Mr. Chairman, that's the stone line channel that PJ Keating allowed the town to construct on his property. We provided the easement to the town to do that work. We provided the rock to do that stone line channel. I don't know when it was done, but there was complaints from the folks who live in this neighborhood here that they were getting flooding. And there's also folks over here. In fact, if you drive down Lower Keene Road, you'll see there's a sign that says flood plain. So that's where the water comes up on the other side. But this is a man-made industrial settlement basin. It does have some phragmites around the edges of it, as you would expect. But it's a stone line, it has no hydric soils. It's a permitted by EPA. We have an NPDES discharge permit. I don't know what the allusion is to 2008 or 2007, whatever, we filed for a new NPDES permit on time, within the 5-year period required by EPA. They don't have the staff to get to these things, so they continue their existing NPDES permit until they get to that point in time where they do it. So we are going through draft NPDES renewal right now. We have that draft in our hands. We submitted comments to EPA about that. And that discharge from our site encompasses quite a lot, encompasses not only our property, but where it comes out with the supposed salt marsh damages. Out in the Acushnet River is laughable. If you've been out there, you'll see that the area's been completely dredged. And I have pictures of it. He can show us like the pictures he has as well. But if you were to go out there, you would see that they have very large excavation equipment all over the place out there. They're pulling up all the silt and PCB contaminated soils that are out there. It's a super fun site, that's for sure. So I would ask you to go out there and take a look, because there's no salt marsh there. Moreover, where our channel comes from the property across the private property, which we have an easement for, that's also a stone line channel that was built, who knows, 60 years ago. But in any event, we're permitted to discharge at that location under a federal permit that's issued jointly by DEP and EPA. Okay? And we are in compliance with that permit. So we can say anything we want about that. Mr. Hannon did not need to go investigate what the TSS was. It's readily available. Doesn't take a genius to find it. But even that, I provided them last year's data. Okay? Of TSS and PA. So we weren't hiding anything.
Mr. Bean, you asked for a point of clarification. So the marsh area, is there a pipe discharge or is it the stone line channel discharge?
It's a stone line channel discharge. Right now, the way that the cleanup's going on is they've built an access road down there, and they put swamp adding down where the salt marsh was, and the swamp adding is now, so here's where, this is where the pipe comes out. They built a road here. It's typical within a wetland that you use timber mats in order to access. And they built a road all the way around the interior and back, and that's where they access everything with their large equipment. The area is completely ripped up, completely. So how anyone can say that we impacted the salt marsh is pretty almost self-evident. They are tearing up all the soil, all the salt marsh, everything that's out there in order to get it set it down. So I think maybe there's some confusion there. That's an EPA Superfund site. They're doing that work. We didn't impact the salt marsh. It's also one more thing to put, that pipe, so when the tide comes in, the tide can come up high enough and actually push the water back up the channel. Right? And so, this idea of an illicit discharge is just, in other words, what you're saying is EPA and DEP allows us to have an illicit discharge and cause damage to salt marsh. That's in effect, if you sign this tonight, what you'll be saying. So you'll be pointing the finger at EPA. So, that's up to you.
So there is a pipe there. What is the pipe? Or is there a pipe?
No, so our channel burns out.
Just may represent.
There's not a pipe. So what happens is they build the timber mat platforms, okay? So they put those on the ground and they put them on top of each other, okay? So that the weight of the vehicles doesn't sink down into the mud and it's out there. So right now, where we discharge into the Acushnet River, it's not through a pipe, it's through a channel. But because of the road that they built, then that water goes underneath that timber mat right now, okay? So, and there's no, so to speak, on our side of the property where the road is now, there's no salt marsh whatsoever. It's freshwater, an invasive species. they can grow anywhere, as you know. It's all freight lines. Okay. There's no hydric soils in that channel line. And just like we found that there's no hydric soils where the town built the stone line channel, you have to have both vegetation and hydric soils in order to be a wetland area. The enforcement order doesn't even say what type of wetland it is. It just says it's a wetland. I've never seen that before. Let's see. So, next what was said. Well, all the stuff about stopping work, and resource areas, and things of that
Excuse me,
nature.
Mr. Chair, can I ask what type of wetlands would you say it is? What type of wetlands would you say it is? Seeing it as our own water. Okay, thank you.
Well, again, I mean, Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, you did do some logging out there, and we all agreed.
I was still talking about salt marsh.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I've heard that.
I was just
Yeah.
referring to his
Yeah.
statement.
So the salt marsh, it obviously, the salt marsh that goes up, we have a tidal Acushnet River going up and down, right? So where we are is where the Phragmites is. Now on the opposite side, the salt marsh is grown there in the past. It doesn't exist there anymore because of all the dredging that's gone on. So I just think that there's some confusion as to who did something to the salt marsh. I spoke to the property owner who let us on the property, and the property owner said he never told Mr. Hannon that we couldn't go on the property on Saturday morning. He told Mr. Hannon that he didn't want him on his property because Mr. Hannon was walking on his property without permission and accused him of killing the wild. And that person will be, that person is the owner of the property. PJ10 is not self-monitoring. The effluent that comes off of our property. We, by every right, by EPA's own permission and admonition, allows us to take the samples. We take samples, and then we send them to Net Labs in Cranston, Rhode Island, and they do the analysis. We are required to do a chain of custody that we sign to say that we took the sample at the correct location, and that we didn't tamper with the sample, and that we brought it directly to Net Labs on ice. Okay? It's analyzed for a number of different things besides TSS and pH. pH we regularly monitor on our own, as well as having it tested by the lab. And the other statement about some reference to that we sample once a month. In reality, we sample that twice a month on dry events, okay? And then quarterly, every 3 months, we have to sample after 0.1 inch rain events, okay? So this talk about, that we sample after a 0.1 inch rain event is 4 times a year. The remaining period of the time, the other 24 samples that we take do not get influenced by rainwater or stormwater. Also, the permit doesn't allow us to commingle stormwater and process water. So that's another fiction. I don't want to belabor the point. I think, we showed quite clearly that the stone line channel that was built by the town is just that. It has some wetland vegetation in it. It has no hydric soils. We asked that if the town is going to find that that is a wetland area, either upstream or wherever they think the wetland area is, then the town itself offered a notice of intent that was filed by the DPW in order to do that work. There wasn't one, okay? So here the town is enforcing not even their own activities. Again, I don't know when that occurred, but no notice of intent has popped up unless you have confidence. No. So that seems a little bit, let's see. Remove all material from the buffer zone. Well, what he's alluding to there is that the stone line channel built by the town and our process settling basin are wetlands. Now, we're supposed to remove everything within 100 feet of that. That includes our office building that's been there forever. That includes our construction, maintenance garages that have been there forever. I don't think it makes it as far back as where the new asphalt plant was. I guess apparently it wants to take that a long time. You know, this was all entirely drummed up and absolutely, in our opinion, fabricated by his hand. He's got quite the reputation. And he was on the Conservation Commission, not changed. Unfortunately, the town took him off the Conservation Commission for conflict of interest. So, you know, I don't want to keep going on. I mean, it's clear to us that we're not in violation. It's clear to us he's not regulated wetland areas. This is an industrial property zoned for such. His grandfather has been there for 100 years. And then to come up in July 2020, with everything else that we're dealing with in this world, these falsehoods, is just everybody's wasting time. So I appreciate that the commission thinks hard before they sign that document and realize that by signing that document, you agree those are wetlands, you agree that we have a list of discharges, you agree that we're impacting salt marsh. I think you'll find that very difficult to do. Thank you.
Mr. Dean, I still have to go there.
Yes, sir.
A question based on enough that came up. Regarding what would have been considered a stop work order. So normally, first of all, was there a stop work order? Okay. And so this new drainage area between the parking lot and Main Street, did that happen during the stop work order? No. So I'm curious as to what took place during the stop work order time? Was it just replacing of the stone in that area? That grassy area between the parking lot and...
Yes, sir. So that, actually, we have proof of it. The person who takes the samples for us was having a difficult time getting to the sample because of vegetation that had grown up. So we said, well, let's make it a little bit easier. It wasn't intentional at all. That had already been stone. We just put fresh stone there. And whether it was washed stone or whatever, he claims. He has no knowledge of whether it was washed or unwashed. It's just the hearsay. So that again is, unless he's been trespassing on the property, I don't know how he would know that. He hadn't seen it until Saturday morning because it hadn't been there, quite honestly. But you are allowed to put fresh stone where stone exists, where that's not even an overflow. That was for the purpose of one of our technicians to go down and get to the sample location. No water goes over that area. There's no drainage area that even hits that. What happens is the water goes into the new silt drains that we put along the front of the parking lot, then goes into a septic tank, 5,000 gallons, 1,500 gallon septic tank, and it's for settling out purposes of the silt, because we're constantly washing the driveway off so we don't get track out into the street. So what we do is we take our water truck and we push the material towards that main drain. That main drain goes into a 1,500 gallon, essentially septic tank. The settles are allowed to settle out. Once the water rises up enough, then it'll hit the conveyance pipe. That conveyance pipe then runs along the front of our parking lot, as you look at where the bushes are. And that pipe underground and discharges to another footed catch basin. Okay? So literally, hardly any surface water gets into that catch basin. It's only from what is first treated at the concrete septic tank, and then comes down and goes into that footed catch basin. That footed catch basin then has a pipe that goes back up into basin 1C for additional BMP and cleaning. All known by EPA, all approved by EPA, all stuck with EPA. So, I don't know, EPA is a federal, as we know. They take jurisdiction. And so you can claim that you have all this jurisdiction from the Acushnet River all the way through the back of our property. But, you know, I beg to differ if that's the case. We have every right to discharge, and we don't have this.
You made mention in the communication with the agent about, there was a pipe that had been installed and you said part of it, which pipe?
Right, so they're over by construction, we call it the mobile maintenance garage. So that would be over at this location here, again, aside from where the stone line channel by the town was built. We put up a visual barrier at that location. The visual barrier was requested by the town commission. All the new visual barriers were requested by the town commission. We showed the town commission what we planned to do. We didn't get no feedback. Just please put up some visual barriers, so that when the vegetation goes down, we won't be able to see the plant. We did that. And it wasn't a cheap undertaking. So again, you know, to say that we built that, the other thing is, if you know, I know you're all familiar with the Wells Protection Act, you can build fences in a buffer zone, even if it was considered a buffer zone. You can build those fences in a buffer zone. It's an accept that you don't need to file anything. Okay? I can tell you where that site is if you go here. That is 310 CMR 10.02 B2. The following minor activities provided by comply with 310 CMR. Fencing provided will not constitute a barrier to wildlife movement. I don't think there's a lot of wildlife movement. Plus they're lifted off the ground. So,
Does anybody else have questions for Mr. O'Neill?
Yeah, Mr. Regan, what year was that approved settling basin by the EPA?
Well, it's been there. So that settling basin predates EPA and DES permit situation and all that stuff. So they know that it's there. The purposes of getting settling out material that would come up from our basin 1A quarry. It's just part of our, we recycle a lot of water within it. All of our conveyor belts, where the sand comes off, where the rock comes on, they're all wetted down so that we can control the dust. Okay? That water comes from that same basin. When we don't pump into the settling basin unless we need to, because the water in that particular basin gets too high. Then we'll pump it up into that. Again, you know, you sort of can't have it both ways. You can't build a industrial settling pond without being called a wetland, but you need the settling pond in order to meet your water quality standards. So, you know, it's not a wetland area. It's not pure wetland area. It's south side, the earthen berm, and the north side. Right? So it's a pipe. That when the water gets high enough on the north side, then it will hit that 12-inch pipe, it will cross over the south basin, and then it will continue settling and go through the three booms that are in that settling basin, which I'm sure you saw.
There were some visual blocks you said that were put in by request by the town.
Yes?
What other requests have you met with the town that they've made?
Oh, we've got numerous. As you probably know, the board of selectmen under a land use permit denied the asphalt tax, so that's under appeal. And we bought, Andy, you probably speak better to this. We bought the fire department a $70,000 piece of equipment, higher than that,
Yeah.
greater than that. The fire department.
Specifically to the
Okay, you asked us what else we do for the town.
Yeah, specifically within the Conservation Commission and what we're here to discuss.
Yeah.
that enforcement order?
Oh, well, we haven't done anything than what we showed you Saturday morning. You know, the visual barriers, if you're gonna call that a wetland, then, you know, it would be in that buffer zone, but we showed that it wasn't a wetland. And we don't need, professional wetland scientists, I've been delineating wetlands for many, many, many years. I'm not a professional wetland scientist, don't pretend to be one. But anybody can go in with a soil auger, go down, if it comes up with very dark, hydrant, wet soils, then you know you have piping soil. And that's not the case. That's not what we found on Saturday morning.
I just want to remind the commission that we're not here to judge the character of either side of the, yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dino.
Thank you
Mr.
very
Dino, I'll give you a chance to respond, and then I'll take questions from anybody here who would like to ask.
First, I'd like to give Mr. Vigno a chance to retract his statement that I was discharged from the Oxbridge Conservation Commission for conflict of interest. Would you like to retract that statement, Mr. Vigno?
That's what I read in the paper.
You've never read that in the paper. So the commission knows. I served my full 3 years. I was a chairman for 2.5 years, and I moved on to the finance committee, and my second year on the finance committee. I take volunteerism very seriously in my time. Fortunately for the town of Acushnet, myself and your agent made it out into the marsh area before it had been excavated by the EPA contractor. That's how we were able to take the pictures. It's not fiction, it's fact. The pictures don't lie. We have a statement from the EPA contractor doing the work. This is part of enforcement. And that information will come out as you get through. And not everybody can stick an auger in the ground and determine whether the soils are hydric or not. You do need to be a wetland scientist to meet the requirements to flag resource areas. It's been a long time, since anyone was delineated at this site, looking at the wetlands loss maps for 2005 through 2019. There are significant areas of human-altered resource areas in this quarry that fly in the face of that ANRAD. And I believe if you look at that ANRAD, it was prepared for P.J. Keating, by P.J. Keating's engineer. And they chose to ignore it. That's unfortunate for them. Your agent knows what she's doing. She saw the damage in the marsh. She can verify that the contractor was in the process of excavating the marsh. But he took us to the area where the impact was. He showed it to us himself. It's not fiction. Thank you.
No, any further comments on that? Okay. Mr. Hannon, you now, Pat, just in case anybody else has questions. Does anybody have questions? Mr. Hannon, I didn't get a chance to do that earlier.
Mr. Hannon, I do publicly retract the statement about the Oxbridge Conservation Commission. Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience would like to ask a question or speak on the project? Krishna, if you would. Actually, you gotta use the short microphone here.
I'd just like to make a comment that, just because something's been going on for 100 years or better, doesn't make it right. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be, adjudicated. I think that the current climate in the nation clearly shows that, what's going on. But I've walked along South Main, I live right there many times, and the amount of silt and other oils and whatever's in that water, I don't know, I've seen it, flies down to the river. We're spending $400 million to clean that river. I think it's a fantastic resource for the town of Acushnet. In that respect, why would we want to continue to let someone contaminate the river? I would love to see that river usable at some point in my lifetime. I think that's why we're spending the money that's being spent. You know, when there's heavy rains and massive flooding, the material is being washed out of that facility tenfold. And again, I think that's the commission and, you know, the town of Acushnet should take a real close look at that and what's being done. Just because it's been going on 100 years doesn't make it right. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions, comments? For either Mr. Vigneault or Mr. Hammond? So we have two separate enforcement orders here. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. We should definitely deal with these separately. So enforcement, the first of the two enforcement orders focuses on what's happening with the settling basins at the very eastern edge, western edge of the property along South Main, along with whatever happened next to where those visual barriers are put in. Does that sound correct to you? That's what I'm reading. Well, the discharge, the salt marsh, that's enforcement order number 2. Yeah.
Can you please read specifically what?
Sure, I will. Please.
Chairman, the reason for the two separate orders was it was thought that the sound barriers and the buffer zone, what we thought was the buffer zone to the wetland, but later discovered it was all pushed back and maybe in the resource area. It was thought that that could be dealt with easier. So that was made into a separate enforcement order. It may not be easy because of the dispute, and I think that getting the wetland scientists to come in and delineate that, just, that's the law. That's what it is. What popped up was Merrily came to the conclusion, I was already of the mind that basin 1C at the front of the property by South Main was in fact a resource area. And we had contacted the circuit rider for DEP, hoping that DEP circuit rider would come up to the site visit, but they're still in their working from home situation and couldn't come out. But when we came across the ANRAD and found that in Keating's own ANRAD, it had been marked as a resource area, that the buffer zone applies. And in fact, the unnamed tributary, which is a stream, would have an even bigger buffer zone, 200 feet. So when Merrily measured the sound barrier at the back of Basin 1C by where they're installing the new asphalt plant, it turned out that the first piece of equipment was 24 feet from that edge of that. They're calling that 1C. 1A is over here. Oh, this is the station right there. It's down in the hole.
We didn't see that.
No, we didn't get that far. And then, so you've got two different buffer zones there. You've got 200 feet for the stream, and you've got 100 feet for the wetlands, and then whether or not you allow them to use the buffer zone. If you would want to have 40,000 gallons of liquid asphalt in the buffer zone, headed up to the Acushnet River, if there was an issue, that's something you really need to get some professional advice on. The town hasn't been given any engineering plans to date on the new asphalt plant. They don't know how anything's been constructed. They don't know how the containment areas were constructed. They don't know if they're liquid tight or water tight. There's a lot of unknowns about it. And that's the other reason we wanted to bring in third-party professionals certified to do all of these things, make all of these determinations, and not gonna be the guy in life for this.
Either you can answer it or you can answer this. So this unnamed tributary, is that a natural tributary or is that something created to take stuff off the property?
Well, I went through the Wetlands Protection Act definitions. And tributary is a stream. Plain and simple.
Sir,
That's it.
sir,
Thank you.
all,
But I want to have you go for the
Okay.
microphone. Just because we need to record. It's not something that's on a microphone over there.
sir,
There's a big difference between a stream and an intermittent stream.
Mm-hmm.
You can call it a stream, it is, it dries up, both the one that comes off the site, goes into the Acushnet River, dries up, as does the stream, obviously from the neighborhood, dries up. They're intermittent streams, they have no 200-foot riverfront area. That's just not right. So that, I know that there was something else that was mentioned that, I don't want to say it again, but don't get confused. This is an intermittent stream, and it has no buffer zone, there's no dam associated with it, any value. It's block line. You have to remember that in order for a wetland to be a wetland, not only has to have the vegetation, hydric soils like I mentioned, but to be a wetland of any value at all, it has to have habitat value. There's no habitat value associated with the storm line channel. You don't have turtles burrowing in, laying their eggs, and so on and so forth. And I just want to mention that just because these yellow areas have since been marked up, doesn't mean anything. The only bordering vegetated wetland on the site is out in the rear of the site, as clearly shown by the Mullaney Engineering Company. I mean, we can make yellow marks on this all day long, but, it doesn't mean anything. Now, if you wanted to show that, you might have an isolated wetland area here, may or may not meet the definition of an isolated wetland off our property, underneath the transmission line, it's all Phragmites once again, then that may be, something that you might consider. But all this yellow markup, I don't even understand what it means. This quarry pond, the quarry's been here, so why there's wetland vegetation or anything in those similarly marked to what's over here, this doesn't really make any sense. These areas here, up here, that no longer exist, were for our clarifying system. We would put silt through those. They were serpentine channels in order to have, again, silt fall out to the water. Part of an industrial process system. Okay. So I don't know what the yellow markings are meant to indicate, but they were obviously put on back in fact.
Merle, you want to comment on the yellow?
My question is, why would they put on the plan at all? They don't need it.
They did. Here's another mark plan. Nothing's marked plan.
Thank you.
It's marked up.
Just to set up the next one.
On the plan that hasn't been marked up, there's no indication that there's any wetlands at all. That's been marked up on this Kelly. This is what it is. This is what the place was marked there. Okay? There's no indication that there's any wetlands there.
That's what I call it.
What is that stipulated?
It means according to the legend here, it means USGS Quad Swamp.
1941 USGS Quad Swamp.
On the plan.
Why did you put it on the plan?
Oh, I have no idea, I wasn't around when it was done, but I mean,
Your clarification on the quad swamp is, I've not heard that phrase before.
I have never heard it either, and it's 1941. What relevance does it have 60 years later? You're kidding me, right? Everything hasn't changed since 1941?
And what I'm wondering is, why would a 1941 swamp end up on a 2010 ANRAD? What would be the reference point for that? Do you have any idea?
Mr. Chairman, when the ANRAD was done by the engineer, he determined based on his research that that was a wetland. And that's why, if you look at the legend over here, the dots signifies the wetland. So all Merrill did was take a yellow highlighter and highlight with yellow dots in that basin. That's all she did was call attention to it. You didn't really notice it when you first looked at the plan. After looking at this like 3 times, things start to jump out at you. And the only thing that's been available prior to this was an 8.5 by 11 plan. You really couldn't pick anything out. Merrill did some searching through file cabinets. I had done some research on the registry of deeds, looking for other file plans or what is the conditions or other things. And when we got the full-size plan, these areas with the wetlands legends in them were marked here by Keating's engineer on the map Keating. And just because it got modified later doesn't mean it's not a wetland. Just because they ripped it up and tore it up and put stone in the middle of it and put channels in it, it was a wetland, it is a wetland. And all the more reason to hire a third-party wetland scientist to come in and resolve this. When I was on conservation in Uxbridge, we adopted the DEP Wetlands Enforcement Manual. The Wetlands Enforcement Manual will tell you that most violators can even try and tell you they're exempt. It's not this and it's not that. Recognizing that everyone's a volunteer and everyone has different levels of expertise in interpreting these things. That's the reason that the Wetlands Protection Act allows you to hire third-party engineers at their expense to come in and resolve this. And I think that the town of Uxbridge and the of Acushnet deserves the right to exercise that authority and make them come in and delineate this entire site. You need a plan on how they're going to work this site, and where they're going to store materials, and how big those stockpiles are going to be, and what they're going to do to stabilize those stockpiles, prevent runoff, prevent silt, prevent all those things they say they do. Because my observations right now are they don't. But the marking was purely to make it stand out, not to make that the sign that it was a wetland. It goes into that legend right there.
No, really, what I'm not getting up here though is, if those quad swamps are wetlands, why didn't Moline flag them as such, like they did everything in the back? Do you have any idea why that happened? To me, that doesn't make any sense. If it's a wetland, it should be flagged.
Right, all I remember about the ANRAD was that they were interested in the property in the back.
Okay.
So that's what they flagged. As far as anything on the quarry itself, when I didn't go on the quarry, I went in the back. You know, I came into the big lane.
So then, should I imply from that or infer from that this was flagged? Anything else that's in here in the stippling was done from records?
Right, that's what it looks like.
I can't say that's entirely helpful in this situation. Did you want to comment, Mr. Lino?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would just context again, thank you for the log map. But I also want to note that the town has inspected everything out here, building inspector. Inspected the visual berms, the visual walls that were put up. Inspected everything about the asphalt plant, the containment areas. We gave them plans. So to say that the town hasn't had the opportunity to review plans, we've gotten sign-offs for every single thing that's done from the town.
So I'm going to read this first enforcement on here so we all know what we're talking about. So, you know the name and address. So the key sections here, list the extent and type of activity. So what's written is alteration of a wetland, parentheses filling, construction of barrier walls in a wetland or associated buffer zone, work within the buffer zone, that would be installation of asphalt plant, truck seals, etc. Installation of a drain pipe directing entry to stormwater to the wetland at the rear of PJT repair garage. And the findings here list that the activity has been or is being conducted in the area subject to protection under Chapter 131, Section 40, or the buffer zone without approval from the issuing authority. So that would be either valid order of conditions or a negative determination. So what the order is stating is, property owner, his agents, permittees, and all others shall immediately cease and desist from any activity affecting the buffer zone and or resource areas. And file, so what, and to continue, no further work shall be performed until a public hearing has been held and an order of conditions has been issued to regulate said work. The property owner shall take the following action to prevent further violations of the Act. Submit plans for all anticipated activities in the buffer zone and associated resource areas. Stop all work in the buffer zone to the hot mix asphalt plant construction. Prevent any discharge of the wetland from the illegal pipe drain located by the garage adjacent to LNS concrete. So we've got a couple of guys, Mr. before I continue.
I apologize. But as I'm sure the commission knows, the enforcement order has no enforcement in it until the majority of the Conservation Commission people sign it. So they can tell us that we're supposed to file an NOI by August 1st or this or that, or whatever they want. But right now, it's up in the air. It's up to you folks as to whether you want to sign it. So right now, it's just issued and it doesn't, so you sign it.
Before you walk away,
Yes, sir.
because I don't know where things are located here, this says, work in the buffer zone to the hot mix asphalt plant construction. Can you point out the hot mix asphalt plant is?
All these buildings is around me, it's right here between, subdivision is 1C and that location here. So the inference is that because this southern basin is being called a wetland area, whether it's 100 foot of course, architecture is distance. So it could possibly be directly on the water.
And everything else is just stuff that's on these things for everybody, and, spaces to fill in just in case. All right, so since I'm the chair, I guess I'll speak first on this. I think we'd have a really hard time proving that's a wetland in that corner if no NOI was filled to do that work. You backed ourselves into a corner here. We could sign it. These things, if they're signed and they want to appeal, they don't go to DEP, they go to Superior Court. But I don't see how we win this project. There's so much of a different issue. But if that's a man-made drainage area with stone walls and non-hydric soils and fragmites, which is not habitat, there's nothing nests in there. I'm not trying to give the company a pass here, I just don't see how we win this one. So that's my comment. I don't know if anybody else would like to comment, question, rebut.
I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that this project is not in wetland area asphalt.
I have a real hard time proving it. And the work is done. It's not done. Okay. Anybody else on that end of the table?
I have a hard time voting on this.
You guys in the cheap seats.
Sorry?
So you guys in the cheap seats.
You guys have better sheets.
No, cheap seats.
Oh, cheap sheets, I'm sorry. Todd's idea was a
I'm not trying to swear at you.
I have an issue with voting on this the way it stands without having, with the conflict as great as it is, defining where that wetland delineation lies. How does that affect, would the NOI would have prompted the delineation if there was one?
No, if, when the town of Water Public Works did that work on that northwest corner, they would have had to file an NOI with us because it would have been a flag wetland. And that didn't happen. So if we sign this enforcement order, and they take it to Superior Court, Superior Court's gonna ask us, well, where's the NOI, where's your paperwork for this work? If it was a wetland, we're not gonna have any. Who's calling me? Mr. Hannigan, please. I'm willing to be proven wrong.
Just another point from research, there is information that the town actually filed an emergency order to do that work.
When was that?
Prior to doing that work. Your agent's trying to find it, there's a lot of files there. There was an emergency order. That's,
Before or after the work was done? Okay.
and then again, if the town didn't file a notice of intent, you can file a notice of intent after the fact. That doesn't make you lose anything in court. That's what you really need to do is let a wetlands professional come out and delineate these areas and get the answer once and for all. And as far as the barriers already being up, every day that they remain there is a violation. And they've been erected without a permit. The building inspector has been mailing letters to Keating asking for the necessary plans and documents to show that that was put up in accordance with the Construction Control Act, and that's gone unanswered. You can't assume from a violator that it's a fait complete. Those barriers are in a resource area or a buffer zone, and they were put there without permits. Had they been through the permitting process, it would have gone through the process in Town Hall, where a rubbing sheet went through, and then went to the building department, the planning department, the health department, and the Conservation Commission, and this wouldn't have happened. But because they're disregarding all of these things, this happened. And it would be unfortunate if the commission gave up their authority to, all you're doing is ratifying an enforcement order. That's all you're doing, you're ratifying. And they have a choice of filing a notice of intent or going to court and getting the court to override this. And that's why the town has attorneys, and that's why they have attorneys. And it could all shake out there. It's not a matter of winning or losing. It's a matter of protecting a resource area and a wetland. This is a very complicated site, a very heavily regulated site. There's a lot going on out there. I asked for a plan of the sequencing of the quarry, and I was told it's a trade secret. So how do you know where the stockpiles are going to be? How do you know where they're basically going to be? How do you know all these things? They won't give the information, and they don't want to let you on the site. I would ask that you ratify the enforcement order and require the third-party engineers and let the chips fall where they hang. Thank you.
Agent Kelly, how much time are you requesting to find that emergency order? The NOI, right?
Tomorrow I'll know when I get that.
One more day.
One more day, yeah.
Yeah, because there's no endless time there if we file those. That's what the insinuation. You file an emergency declaration because of the flooding that's occurring, okay?
And so that's what the town presumably did, but we can't even find that paperwork. But as the chairman and I discussed on Saturday morning, you can file an emergency declaration and you go ahead and do the work. But you have to file a notice of intent within the time of manner. I believe it's 21 days. So you can't do it 15 years later.
I would disagree with that. You can file a notice of intent after the fact anytime you want. But blaming someone else for a violation to negate your violation doesn't pass the test. Every site visit we went on for a violation, people turned in their neighbor as well. That's just a very empty doorway that goes in.
So how are we able to determine whether the area underneath the power lines is wetlands? To the northwest corner behind O&S, where
Well, yeah,
the visual barrier.
I don't know that part of it is flagged. It certainly wasn't flagged for this. You know,
But it is on all of them.
Huh?
All of this is on your DEP, on your all of your GIS.
Right.
All of the ones are depicted there, and they're even carried on their handwriting. Here's their,
This is probably a continuation of that.
here's their maintenance building, and here's that wetland that he's talking about. Here's the wetland where it wraps around the back of L&S. And looking at all of it, there's also 3 potential vernal pools back there. I'm not a believer in potential vernal pools myself, but they are now.
Molly, let's go to the question of a consulting firm like Beal and Taylor. Beals and Thomas. I got the letters right anyway. Are they a firm that could help us get all of these things sorted out?
I think they are, they have good weapons to go up to all the good engineers. Yes,
Well, this is certainly new one for us, and I don't know, I'm not feeling like I have enough information here.
Mr. Chairman, is there any type of stormwater protection evaluation available to be performed, other than the town or by PJP?
Isn't that in these, do I ask the question again? We can answer that.
I'm sorry, sir, I didn't hear what you said.
Is there a third-party stormwater protection evaluation performed?
Yes, so every single month, we file what's called DMR, discharge monitoring reports. We file them electronically with EPA. If anything exceeds an effluent limitation, then you immediately get hit back a notice from EPA that says, realize that you were over your whatever limit might be. So that's an automatic process, and those exceedances then go into another place at EPA where they track these things. And if you have a number of exceedances, then they can issue a fine if they want.
Right, but is there an independent resource that can do that?
An independent resource that can do what?
What you just said, take some samples from the stormwater runoff. Independent party.
Yeah, we're not required to.
I know that.
I mean, could there possibly be? Yes, but we're covered under the rules of the federal government.
Understand, I'm only asking if there's a resource available.
Well, I'm sure Beals and Thomas could take some samples if they wanted to, if that was the case, but, again, we'll hire our own wetland scientists as well. I can guarantee that.
Mr. Chairman, may I comment?
Please, for the record.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Since you brought up the issue of
I need you to identify yourself for the record.
David DeRoche, 1399 Main Street, Acushnet, Mass.
Or so.
Well, I'm here as a resident today. So, your other enforcement order has to pertain directly to stormwater discharge. I've been talking about it, I'm talking about the one on the wetland, but the other order is completely for stormwater discharge. And what was brought up, I thought I would reach the subject. And your question on who does studies, if you go to the EPA website, the ECHO website, you can see the status of the quarry for the last 3 years, divided into quarters. The last 2 quarters, in December of last year ending, and the one ending in March of this year, they were both found in violation of effluent discharge. And out of the last 12 quarters, PJ Keating has been in violation 7 quarters out of the 12 of discharge violations, including the big one back in September 18 when they were fined $140,000. So your question about third-party supervision, the EPA is reviewing every quarter, does put this information on their website. Do research. So, thank you very much.
As comfortable as I am with signing this, it sounds like we are still in need of some more information to make a truly informed decision. It's something that big deals in Thomas could do for us. Or a soft run like that. So, I mean, don't make a motion, or we just make the people, when they decide that they want to sign it. I mean, that's usually how this works, right? If you have an enforcement order, you come to the office and sign it if you want to. So, Mr. Hammond?
What you would actually do, Mr. Chairman, is someone would make a motion to ratify the enforcement order. You would take a vote on ratifying the order.
That's true, yeah. I've never been this very often in this town.
We get a lot.
All right, so, throw it out, I'll entertain a motion to ratify the first enforcement order. We'll vote on these separately. Okay, do we have a second? Do we have any further discussion? In favor? Opposed? Abstaining? None? 2 abstains? How many yeses? Right. And 1 no? So we got what? 4, 1, and 2. No, I don't. Yeah. 3, 1, and 2, I guess that. Can we have a majority say yes to ratify?
Is that a majority of the Conservation Commission?
3, well, 6 of the 7 members are here, but 3 of the 6 that are here voted yes. So that doesn't look like a majority. And so the second enforcement order that we're So again, we know where, so the extended type of activity, alteration of a resource area leading to the Acushnet River, uncontrolled discharge of untreated stormwater to a resource area, illicit discharge of processed wastewater for the alteration of multiple resource areas, work in an upland area, deposit soil to a road into a distant wetland, that being a salt marsh. These activities then has been or is being conducted in areas subject to protection under Chapter 130, Section 40. The activity is outside the area subject to protection in the buffer zone, but has an alternate area subject to Mass General Laws, Chapter 131. The contention there being that because of where it originated, it counts as, if you go down here, it was a resource area on property that was, or in the town, it was jurisdiction of so much discharge. This is activity subject to Mass General Laws, Chapter 130, Section 40, but no approvals were sought. Other activities upland have affected a resource area regulated by 310 Code of Mass Regulations 10.022C. So the property owners, agents, permittees, and all others shall immediately cease and desist from any activity affecting the buffer zone and/or resource areas. Completely attached NOI, that would be August 1st. And this would be for stormwater discharges to a resource area, illicit discharge of processed water from quarry operations to the unnamed tributary outflow 1 and outflow 2. Property owner shall take following action to prevent further violations of the Act: submit an erosion control plan, stormwater control plan, dust control plan, prepare and submit a wetland delineation of the site, submit existing conditions plans of all stormwater and sediment basins and contours. No discharge of the site, no discharge off-site to any outfalls or the unnamed tributary other than wetlands discharge at outfall 1. So this one specifically pertains to discharge to the salt marsh.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Vigneault,
Thank you
please.
very much. So, once again, this is alluding to federally discharged permit that we have in the MDD test. We can say that we've exceeded all those things, I'm not aware of those. I fill out the DMRs, I know if we get receipts, it comes up. We don't change the numbers, do it just as the lab gives it back to us, we don't fool around with anything, with some type of fraud or anything like that. We put in what it is, okay? So I just want to show folks, this is the drainage area for where the discharge is, the salt mine, okay? So this whole area is off of PJT's property. This is PJT in here. So this is all additional contributory area, okay? PJT property here, all this additional area remains in the same location. Okay? This is PJT property right here, on the opposite side of South Main. This is all the area that drains to that location. There's being alleged to have damage to the salt. So, if anyone can claim to tell me that you can differentiate that and what might be contributed from this area here as well, which includes sand piles, other things and whatnot, and all drain to that same point. We make up about, very conservatively, 10% of the drainage area that discharges to that location. You can blame it all on us, there's no salt marsh out there. So, again, what you're essentially saying by signing that is that EPA and DEP are not doing their job.
Before this vote happens, any further comments or questions?
Yeah, well, just an observation I made at the stone line area out front of the property, there was a turbidity current that went across the stone line channel that goes under the road and out to the salt marsh. And I asked Doug if that was the last line of defense between the water that leaves and where it goes, and he said it was. Beyond that turbidity current that goes across that stone line drain, there was silt all along the vegetation in that area. And, you know, he said that the tide comes up and pushes, that's an awful long way for the
You
tide.
didn't come up that far, no.
Right, so I mean, if that sediment is on the vegetation that high up, I mean, you know, I just feel like this should be it's gotta be evaluated or looked at, or something else is gonna be put in that spot, you know what I mean? Just because, I mean, even the curtain itself is completely covered in gray, and it's a pretty distinctive color that's coming from the site. That's just my observation.
You know, with respect to the gentleman from PJQ, I'd still like to know, there's a consistent pattern of violations concerning this exact thing you're talking about. It's been documented quite clearly on the EPA website. This past quarter, as far as solids total suspended being discharged, a 30% increase. And then another category in the same quarter concerning total suspended discharge again, 43%. Then a limit violation, effluent gross, turbidity, that's the category it is, we're talking about turbidity. So the pattern seems pretty clear right now in the sense that 7 out of 12 quarters for violations. Last 2 quarters, this last quarter from the first, from April 1st to now hasn't been, it's been undetermined. So that's still yet to be determined. And if it did come through, that would be 3 quarters in a row that there's been violation of this exact subject that we're discussing right now. So, and I would, open to hearing. Yeah, sure.
So that, what you're seeing there is basically the fact that how things fluctuate from one sample to another. It does not mean you will have exceeded the limit. I looked at all the data, okay, the past 3 years. And in fact, wrote in a letter to EPA today, identified the dates that we exceeded TSS. There was one date, this is after the water quality violation fine, which we agreed to, we paid the bill, right? So we're looking at after the fact. You don't go to jail twice. You pay your due, and they let you go. So all of that before the 2017 final disposition, when we paid $140,000. Water over the did. Now, what they're saying is, what Mr. DeRosa is saying, is that we're violating these things every quarter. We absolutely are not. Okay? Out of the 99 samples that we've taken since January of 2017 to this day, we had 3 violations. So, in essence, 3% of the samples that we took exceeded the TSS limit. And they were barely exceedances at all, except for one occasion, which there was a considerable higher than our discharge allowance. Okay? So we're allowed to discharge up to 23 milligrams per liter of total suspended solids, maximum daily. Okay? And I don't recall the numbers off the top of my head, but again, it happened on 3 occasions out of 99 sampling days. That's 3% of the time. The government doesn't, they monitor, okay? If it happened 50% of the time, would be slapped with another fine. Or 75%, has been alluded to here, would be slapped with a fine, okay? It's happened 3 times. If it happens 2 times in consecutive samples, then there's potential for an automatic $5,000 fine. Automatic. Okay? That's the way they work. We have received no notices from the EPA or DEP that we are even close or even, ring the bell. Watch what you're doing. So on and so forth. Since the time that we signed that enforcement order. And the reason being is that we put in additional BMPs, best management practices. We sweep the property constantly. We wet down the property constantly. We put in a new drain bay out front. We put in a new septic tank. We took action to improve our operations and improve our environmental footprint, so to speak. So whatever happened in the distant past that we've already been spent for is irrelevant. Okay? We're looking at from that date on, and that's the case. 3% of all the samples. Yes, sir.
Who takes these samples?
PJ Keating, we have a technician who takes the samples. Yep, that's how this works. They don't make you go find someone else to go take a sample. Okay?
So when you,
Then we would have to pay them anyways.
as part of the greening process, you go out and take the samples, who decides where those samples are taken?
EPA.
Okay, so, and that's where you take the samples.
Oh, yes, of course. We take an upgradient of the stormwater confluence that the town built, so that we don't take any credit for what might appear to be cleaner water coming from that wetland resource area. And to answer the gentleman's question, they did build that channel from the headwaters of the wetland. They went into the wetland, they built the channel. There's no question, it's on the Mass GIS. Okay? So, if anything, they filled wetlands in order to build the channel. So, yeah. The DPW or the town of Acushnet more broadly. But once again, we allow the town, no questions asked. We want to help you with your flooding alleviation, help the neighbors. You can use our property, you can convey that water over our property. We'll supply the stone for you in order to build it.
It looks like you have a follow-up question.
Well, it's
Just a comment that I guess what you're being asked to decide is, the EPA report's incorrect. Mr. Vignolo mentioned from 2017, that's 6 waters. The EPA report, they've been in violation of 3 of those 6 waters. So, we can go back and forth on what's. I just wanted some information given to me by the gentleman Dave Curran at the EPA in Boston, who directed me to this website, which is the assessment of the quarry reported by the EPA. That's all I can base my comments on.
They don't base things in percent, they base things in milligrams per liter. So what does the percentage mean? The percentage means is the preceding sample had a higher percentage than the current sample. That's what you're looking at, Mr. Guerrero.
Well, when I look at this chart, I see violations, of a common way.
It just plainly don't exist.
So, that's why we gotta decide. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so I've read enforcement order number 2. I'll entertain a motion to vote to ratify.
Make that motion.
We have a second on the motion. Further discussion? Those in favor? That's 3, 4. Those opposed? Those abstained? Right. So this one's passed. The first one is not. So that's it for those 2 items there. The next thing I'm curious about is, I would still like to have a consulting firm help us with this project from here on in. Because I know you are specifically to work on this, but most of your work is for the Board of Health, not for the Conservation Commission. Right. So I'd rather have a wetlands consulting firm working with us.
That's a great one.
Well, I think we need to make a motion to do that, right? So I'll take a motion to have Merle contact the wetlands consulting firm to help us with this project. The monitoring here on in.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Do you have any further discussion? In favor? That sounds unanimous. Thank you. All right, that's it for items on the agenda, I think. Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you all. Thanks to those who were here. Agent updates. Anything else? You said nobody's going? Whatever it is saying, the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissioners has some new training sessions going on.
What are the topics?
It's environmental, it's changes in the environmental laws.
All right, so you can find it on the MECC website. Anybody else, any business with the commission? Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned at 7:41 p.m.